Welcome back to the Wolf of Queen Street podcast. Today on the show, Ray Everest, a man of many hats, an entrepreneur, a coach, a father, a mental health advocate, a father at the age of 16, one of New Zealand's youngest principals at the age of 26, also someone that has started an organization, early childhood centers around Papamoa. I think it's 6 at the moment, the last time I saw on that. Future Focus is the brand, and someone that is going out and doing so much more out in the community and around it. And Ray, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Appreciate you having me in.
It's very rare where I've got to really think about my introduction for someone that's gone through and achieved so much through your life, and so uniqueness in that. Like a father at 16, one of New Zealand's youngest principals at the age of 26, early childhood centre now with 6 across in Papamoa, and it seems like, stumbling block as a teen father, but then you almost took that in your stride to grow on more. First thing I want to get into is straight off the bat is, talk to me about this whole thing of a teen father and going through, because in New Zealand, this is something we see as a common, where it shouldn't necessarily be that. Where that is a whoopsie cultural thing, we do see a lot of teen pregnancies out there. Talk me a little bit through your situation and how you've taken that to inspire yourself going further.
Yeah, certainly a whoopsie. We were kids, we were children, obviously. Cortez, who's my son's mum, was hapu when we were 15, and then he was born when we were 16. That was, for all the tough times I've been through in my life, that was probably the toughest, because it's a sustained period. It's not like you break your leg and 3 months later your leg's healed. And unfortunately, when Tokoroa, where I was brought up, that was happening regularly. But where it shifted for me, and this is where I thank my mum always taught me, you make your bed, you lie in it. And I committed to making sure that I was going to be there for Cortez. We weren't together at all, really, in that space. We were kids. We were children. I didn't meet Cortez actually until he was about 6 months old. His mother and I and her family were just scrapping, and I actually found out he was born by reading it in the paper, which was very hard for me. But I knew that the best thing I could do in life is commit to the situation I caused and do my part in it. But you're 16, and you're trying to be a teenager at one point and do stuff that teenagers are doing, getting excited about school balls or your sport or, what girl you like or whatever. And then the weekends I was dad. But I was very lucky in the support I got for actually committing to trying to be, at that point in time, a dad for Cortez, from my school, which I really, really... St. Paul's Collegiate was my school. They were so supportive. It was unbelievable the amount of people and adults that really stood up for me in my life at that time. Yeah.
Was that something that, because of that support mechanism that they gave you, that showed you, hey, I can do this, right? Because you get two paths, right? Teen pregnancy, you get it as you either get cottonballed around and supported, or you get left alone, and the journey is vastly different for the youth, the kid, if the parent, in every respect of which way it goes, and it never comes out great for anyone involved in that. Do you think it was that support mechanism that got you through, or do you think there was something within yourself that you just, from your upbringing, that made it that you made the decisions as well?
I certainly believe I had a high level of intentionality that certainly pulled me through. When Cortez was born, I committed to making sure that this boy would be proud of me. He would know who his father was, and that he would grow up knowing, actually, I'm proud of my dad, because loved my dad, but he wasn't my hero. And I wanted him to make sure that when he started to be conscious about that he would have someone to look at and say, that's my dad. And in those, it's crazy. I've got some cool stories about what the school kind of let me do to facilitate that scenario when I was playing first 15, but then the boys were going out, and then the housemaster was giving me a room for me to bring Cortez up to have him up at the boarding school. So it's a combination. I think the intentionality was evident to the teachers and the people, the support staff around. So they supported that. And those people are still in my life, like Mr. Henley Smith, Mr. Wilson. They're still big parts of my life. I think it's a combination, but I believe it did start with me committing to actually, I've created this life. I'm going to be part of his life and making some very clear goals around education and outcomes and things like that. Yeah.
What does it mean to be a father?
I've had 2 stages of being a dad. Cortez came into my life and he just was this beautiful, innocent soul, so vulnerable, trapped in a world that he did not choose to be part of. And the anger and hatred that was clear between my family and me and his family was toxic. He's a beautiful kid. Today he's 26 next Wednesday, 19th of March, and he's a beautiful soul and he's very switched on, far more switched on than what I was at that age. But to be a father back in those times, for me, hasn't swayed at all.
Yep.
In fact, that galvanized what it was to be a father, which is, I used to talk about unwavering, but actually when an unwavering love, but in that setting, what Cortez taught me was the ability to actually stop, pause, and listen to what they actually want and need, to protect them from opinions that do not build any level of value into their lives, especially when they're little, which is, I committed to not bagging his mother in front of him. In fact, I tried to not bag his mother to anyone, really, because there was bad energy, bad juju for me. But it comes back down to the fact of an unwavering level of support for who that little character is. And hopefully my actions don't cause too much fucking mess later on down the line. So he's 26 next week, and he is me. He is intelligent. He is kind. He's relentless. That's an element in him that he's certainly got from me about that. But he's proud of who he is, and I am proud of who he is, and I think as a father, that's one of the best things we can ask for. Yeah. And that I hope to execute with my babies, our daughters, today. Good question. Great question.
Oh, I got to throw the curveball. I do it early, mate. I do it early, right?
Yeah.
But one more of those. You think he's proud of you?
Yes. Yes. And the cool thing about that is we have such a. We were just texting the other day about, because it's his birthday next week. Yep. But I know he's really proud of me because when we last caught up, we had a catch up about some tech stuff we're doing, and he said, "You know what? People at work, they said to me, because he's had a bit of a shake up at work. Oh, why don't you just lean on your dad's legacy? Why don't you just lean on your dad's legacy? Look at what he's doing and just go and be part of that." And he goes, "Because that's not what my dad wants."
Yeah.
And then I was like, yes, that's an element here that he's actually cottoned on to. I want him to be who he is. He doesn't need to lean on my shadow. But we also talked to the fact, and we were grateful that actually there is a legacy to leave there. I think because a lot of Māori don't, and that I've experienced with growing up, they don't have that legacy in that space. And they're building their legacy now, which is really cool. But those are the small snippets that I sit back and listen and hear where I know he's certainly very proud of me. And that means a lot to me. It means a lot because if there's anyone in the world that has a right to be angry, it's him. Yeah.
As a parent, my kids are 10, so I'm still I'm in the middle space, right? I'm still a decade away from the age of your boy, and still a little bit different from the rest of your kids. But as a father, a father to a son, that relationship's totally different to a father and a daughter, right? And having a son, we live in a time that having a son going, "I love you, Dad," or it means the world, right? We generationally, we all grew up in different areas. I grew up in South Africa. You grew up in New Zealand. We grew up in different generations, but we also grew up in a generation previously where that wasn't the case from fathers to son, right? I love you, you did a good job, that wasn't, and that was culturally across the world, right? Anyone that was born in, your millennials that was born in your 70s and early 80s and stuff like that, you can all ask them, and very few of them can say, hey, I grew up in a great family and great parents, but that relationship between your dad and your son, even I have a great relationship with my dad. My dad lives next door to us, and only now, 30 years later, can we openly go, I love you, Dad, and we sit down and we have this weirdest thing, like we'll sit down next to each other for 10 minutes and we won't say anything. And that's the sort of...
My dad bucked the trend.
Yeah.
My dad is a Vietnam vet. He was the youngest of 11. His parents were both dead by the time he was 12.
Mm-hmm.
He was raised by his older sisters. He was an uncle by the time he was born. The day he was born, he was an uncle. My dad was actually, this is a crazy way to put it, but when you used to scrap, but your parents are scrapping, you'd be like, oh, they might split up. I'm going to go with Dad.
Yeah.
All of us were like, we're going with Dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was actually a really soft touch.
Yep.
He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't violent. His family were just a beautiful family.
Mm-hmm.
And although I don't remember the words love, I certainly know that I felt that from him a lot.
Yeah.
Especially the real pivotal moment is obviously me coming home and telling my parents that I've got a girl pregnant. And his reaction hurt me more. My mum telling me, oh, you fucked up our lives, you fucking ruined our lives, to my dad crying.
Yep.
That's my dad, and I can only reflect on this now as I've gotten to be to where I am today, because I'm about similar age to what I was, to what they were when I told them, and he was certainly very different. But where it was the emotional availability wasn't there, and that's because his own trauma. Like Vietnam fucked him.
Yep.
There was no support for them. They were treated like scum, and he never quite got over that. So drinking and betting and things was his kind of vice, but he wasn't. But my mum, now that is the challenge. My mum's hard, very hard. She was what you're talking to. She was almost the male or the masculine energy in that space.
Mm-hmm.
She was the one that dished out all the beatings and the jug cord and all that sort of stuff. And she just was staunch.
Yeah.
And in some ways, when I look, because I never knew her mother, but we've only got to know that later on they actually hated her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is systemic. But that's where, interestingly, my dad bucked the trend.
Yep.
He was loving. I remember his cuddles and just being soft and spoiling, and I remember that. So, but that hardness that my mum carried, yes, it taught me some great lessons, but also I have to actively fight that in my own parenting.
In your own style, right?
Yes, because I have to catch my mum, love my mum, and we've improved our relationship drastically, but I have to catch that part in me because it's not a nice part.
Yep. Talking about the anger.
Yeah.
As a teen man, I know that it will be there. I know it is there. If a child very rarely will a child bucket at a teenage age if there's anger around, irrespective if it comes from the mom or dad. I have an anger streak, and due to my condition and my brain, I lose control of my emotions even to these days. So I shut off very quickly, very fast. But talk me through, as a teenager, seeing a bit of that aggression and anger in your household, and how that came into your life. And then now you've got a baby as well, and I know you've spoken before publicly and stuff like that about how your anxiety triggered your anger, and only later on in life I having that understanding. Talk me through how the anger as a teen and early 20s.
Violence is an easy language. It has great feedback receptors. I punch you, you fall over, I get feedback that it makes me feel pretty good. It's actually a real interesting language that people with anxiety exhibit. It's immediate, soothed to how you're feeling internally. But it was, I was a very aggressive individual. I got kicked out of the Waikato Rugby Academy for getting into punch-ups in the street and the weekends. I stupidly, week before the final, get into a fight with one of the other team that's in the final, end up scrapping with two of their players. It's just stupid. But the ability to, the switch was just, and it's, I'm not proud of that element, but in saying that, it was my language at the time that allowed me to cope with living in a world where I felt like I didn't measure up.
Yep.
The best way to gain back control in that time was be violent. And I think in that level, it gave me certainty. Hey, you don't think much of me? Whack.
Yeah.
Now what do you think of me?
Mm-hmm.
It gave me certainty. And I think that's what lacked a lot in my life, was certainty.
Mm-hmm.
I was pumped around to different homes, all loving homes.
Yeah.
My mum, bless her, has told us that she suffered very bad postnatal depression.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing because I was born 8 years after my oldest sibling. I was a whoopsie myself, and their life was set. Dad had a great job. Then, boom, then this child gets thrown in the mix. But it was because I remember when I was little, 5, 6, when I felt anger, I would be so enraged that I'd cry.
Yeah.
It was just this ball of anger.
Because you weren't taught or shown what to do with it, right? And it's interesting you say about the uncertainty. Uncertainty is, we require certainty in our life to give us stability, right? Mm-hmm. It's the uncertainty that with someone that is inclined to anxiety, that is what triggers, right? The uncertainty will trigger the anxiety. And then depending on the way you genetically make up, your anxiety will either tell you to go inwards or to tell you to go outwards. And if you're brought up around the violence or the loudness or the chaos, that anxiety will trigger too violent, because as well as you see it every day, you see it as commonality and see it as the way, the language. I love how you mentioned it, that violence was your language, was the language that was spoken. It's a great explanation around that. And we see it in our youth today. And, you've been a principal and a teacher, and obviously with early childhood centers, we see it. I even to my own kids, there's anxiety that then triggers, and then they don't know where to go with the emotional state that comes off it. They don't know where to go with the aggro and so forth. And it's as a parent or as a teacher or as a leader, we've got to guide them and show them and everything else. But it's also an interesting space that there's a correct way to guide them, or the correct way per person, per situation. But then also we're driven in a society that doesn't necessarily maybe allow us to do it because it's too woke. Like me wanting to guide or coach, because I've come back. Also, I coach, and I've coached my boy. My dad coached me as I grew up. That's one of the greatest things I remember, that my dad was always my coach. And I got guys at my age in their 40s that when back in South Africa, when they message me or call me, they go, "Hey, how's coach?" They still know him in their 40s. They still call my dad coach. They'll never call him by his name. And I did that for my son for 5 years in football and for cricket. And I guided the boys in that team, the same team on each different sport, stayed with me for 5 years because their parents saw the style that I guided with.
Yep.
And worked. And they were like, "Oh my God, I've got a problematic kid."
Yeah.
Put it with Lawrence, he'll give it. But a lot of parents that looked on the outside were like, "Hold on, that style, you can't do that. That's not socially correct." And it was like, it's not about being socially correct, it's about what works.
Yes.
And what works in the realms and stuff like that. I always remember my dad was coaching baseball. He coached baseball in South Africa, provincial, national, even in New Zealand, national level, New Zealand at 23 level, and coached here. And he had parents literally dropping the kids off to my dad and going, "Okay, that kid's your problem now," And that's
what you're talking to is, and this is what I'm alluding back to. You had your dad was an adult that stepped in for these kids when their parents couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm grateful to.
But a lad. This is the sort of this is the humility and stuff I think that we struggle on is there's parents that need help So there's a spectrum of this, and Ray, you understand there's a spectrum of this. So there's parents that need help, and either A, they will ask for help, or B, they would hide, and then it gets to a point where community or family. And in New Zealand, in the Maori or Pacific community, that happens quite common because we can see that, right? We spoke about off air that you grow up around church and in the community. That's where everyone saw what was going on. Everyone is fed. You can feed in and have that community step in. So there's the parents that need the help and the community step in. But there's also the parents that are that maybe lack the skills or don't understand the situations they are in with their kids, but then won't allow someone else to almost parent their kid, right? And that's where the whole situation we have is like, I'll come in and I have a style and it works, but you just got to allow it to happen. And a parent might go, no, you've been too aggressive, you've been too strong. And it's like, boys are boys, man. We said 50 years ago, we sent 15 and 16-year-olds to war.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like, and you want to go, hold on, me being aggressive by giving structure and giving guidance and telling the kid it's a yes or no. There's no maybe. There's no ifs or buts about it. It's a yes or no because we've got to give some structure. And you want to go, no, you've been too aggressive. And that's where that's an interesting space of you got to allow a person to give guidance to another that wants to better the kid for the right reason and allow them to happen. And parents just need to go, okay, that is fine. And that's sort of an interesting space.
Because you're talking in some ways about a compounding effect.
Correct, totally.
So, you know, that's the lessons that Mr. Henley Smith, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Stain, who is a South African rugby coach for me, their lessons are compounding and continue to compound for actually many years.
Yeah.
Not just, again, you're talking about things like structure.
Yep.
Structure provides certainty.
Yeah.
Structure, rugby training's at 3:30 on the field. You're not there. You don't play or you do laps or whatever, no matter how good you are. It's those sorts of things where I agree with you.
Yeah.
The structure we have lost structure. Yeah. And that's actually part of the reason why teaching frustrated me, because I actually didn't have enough time to build a compounding effect with kids because, get to school, we have this, then 9 a.m. got some learning, then, we've got to go out for an assembly, and then this, and then we've got something else on, and I was like, hang on, just give me a chance, man. Give me a chance, because can you imagine and you're talking about sport, and that's always a good analogy. Yeah. If I had an hour with the kids, but every 20 minutes someone turned up and
interrupted
and run a 10-minute music lesson, and then I had to come back round and swing them back round to training. Actually, it's the YouTube shorts of life. Yeah. It's just not functional.
It totally is. I mean, it's interesting in the spectrum of ask any millennial, good or bad of the youth, they will always have a very fond memory about a couple of moments through school, whether they love it or hate it. There'll be everyone, I swear to you now, at a high majority, every millennial or older can name one or two teachers that had an impact in their life. You've just mentioned 100%. A couple of, right? I've got a couple of back of mine, primary school, high school, all the rest of it. Most of my friends are going to do it. But I don't see that in our Gen Zs that are in their early 20s at the moment. And most of them have a lack of fondness for school or that. And it's so true when you're saying is we're missing the point of actually letting them grow through the process and become better versions of themselves than cookie cutter putting in stuff in front of them. And that's the sort of the big things that I'm working with my kids. I mean, my son, the 13-year-old boy, he struggles with his emotional states, trying to teach him. My 16-year-old daughter with autism, obviously that's a different kettle of fish to try and do that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, I've also had to step away and go, hey, I don't care about necessarily grades as important, but I want to care about you coming out of high school and having a great time and a great person, and the world is your oyster, because doesn't matter if you come out with whatever grade you have, you still need to come out as a decent human to be able to survive.
Yes.
Because, if you get pushed to be the best person from a grade level, doesn't mean you're socially ready to go out to the world, right? And we see this, and you would understand that. We see kids now that come out and they'll be the top 20 in their class, in their school, in their whatever. And the social skills are lacking. They've got no understanding of how to interact with humans, other kids. And then we get that whole, again, trigger of anxiety, you pushing down my judgment. And we see it in America. I've been reading some literature, and the movement, the cancel me movement, was triggered from the universities out of America over a decade ago, where youth were brought up and saying, this is your opinion, and anyone that challenges your opinion is wrong and needs to be cancelled. That's sort of the underline. And that's what we're seeing at the moment, is that if you don't say what I agree with, I can then stand there, put my hand on my heart and go, I totally disagree with it, and therefore you need to be cancelled and you shouldn't be allowed to have your opinion. And it's just the craziest space we live in.
Do schools facilitate that scenario too?
The universities, yeah.
But I would almost argue that schools facilitate that scenario. What happens if your son turns around and says, actually, I don't agree with your opinion, teacher?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
and having the emotional intelligence to actually stand back and say, this 13-year-old boy is not just challenging my mana, but actually just saying, hey, I don't agree with you. Maybe could I have some more clarity?
Yeah.
Because education is the gateway to greatness in my mind.
Yes.
All the horrible humans that have existed in our country have been through primary school minimum.
Yeah.
Right? And the great ones.
Yeah.
That's the common factor.
Yeah.
Right? And our curriculum, in terms of supporting, our curriculum's renowned worldwide.
Yeah.
People want it in their countries. But if we going through, if we're in a phase where what you're saying exactly that, hey, my opinion is that this happened, and no, that's what the curriculum also says, and I don't want to take any challenge from you, that makes it very hard for a child to then start to, they will adopt the same attitudes.
100%. Yeah, and it's an interesting space, and I never want to, go and say, hey, look here, I used to being brought up the right way or the wrong way. I definitely think there is, culturally or time period looking at it, there is challenges at the moment. I think a lot of it's been missed, because I think we are fundamentally forgetting what is important, in the sense of we should be raising youth to be better youths. We should be better youths to be better adults, right? Yep. And I'm gonna call out something right now, which I normally do a little bit in the show, and I'm gonna call out a bit of a political one, right? I'm officially a white boy from South Africa. Most people that find that weird, but in South Africa, you actually got coded into your race, which a lot of people in the world find it weird. So most people in New Zealand, when they meet me, they think I'm of Maori descent, but I'm a white boy South African, raised up in that culture. You've grown up in New Zealand, and you mixed through Pakeha and Maori, right, and stuff like that. So I'm an immigrant. You mix across New Zealand. One of the biggest things I see in the space now is this argument about where we should be going culturally with these kids, right? So I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm going to get a little bit of haters. How about we just care about making these kids better people, irrespective of culture? Now, and remember, culture is important, and I know culture is part of the upbringing and your community and the rest of it.
Yes.
How about we leave it out of our schools? And how about we allow our communities that want to bring important culture and the upbringing and so forth, allow them that space. But how about in schools we just focus on what is good for youth? It means it gives them a safe space, gives them a freedom to talk, gives them a freedom to learn and become better humans. And we don't have to worry about this culture being imprinted on them and that culture being imprinted on them and that culture. I grew up in South Africa where I was fed the white man came over and took control of South Africa and made it a republic and the rest of it. Same as like in America. They talk about their history. And I know in New Zealand, it's part of the culture. But I feel as a parent, being from the outside world, my kids are both Kiwis, coming into here, I think it's such a big space at the moment that needs to be almost be shifted away, that can we leave the culture stuff to our communities and not to where our kids should feel safe?
I think the identity piece is the identity politics is certainly dragging into arguments that a lot of people don't want to be part of.
Yeah,
Will and I talk about it. We literally had a conversation about this yesterday, because I talked to my job as an educator and as a coach and as a leader was to help people cope.
Yeah,
if you can't cope, you will make bad decisions for yourselves. 600 plus people do not cope annually in this country.
Yeah.
The worst in the world. 600 people, 75% of those 600 are men, do not cope.
Yeah.
And when we come back to dragging people into arguments that they don't even need to be part of, that's why I'm not on social media. Because why would I put myself into and facilitate that scenario for myself? It's just, we talked about anger.
Yeah.
It's a waste of information and time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, creating great humans is always got to be the outcome.
Yeah.
And building environments for those humans to be who they want to be is actually the key, in my mind, the key role for a successful educational system. I know, because for me, I felt like I was too white to be Māori, too Māori to be white. That's what I grew up in. And being called half caste growing up, you could not say that to someone today, and probably rightly so. But back then it was just like a thing. In fact, to the point I was very lucky. We grew up in a very multicultural town. I remember meeting South Africans. Mrs. Kedian was which is now year 2, so my standard 1 teacher. Kedian, South African. I didn't know what that meant. In fact, to the point where I remember in '94 when the Springboks came to New Zealand and we went to watch them play King Country, and I said to my dad, "Where's all the black fellas?" And then Chester Williams got off the bus, and I went, "Oh, there he is."
Yeah, the one guy.
But they were all Mark Andrews, all these massive white guys. I didn't know.
Yeah,
and that was a great time, a golden era of these young men and women that came out of the education system, not having to be pulled into conversations and arguments that A, we don't know a lot about for a starter, and B, why put them in that situation if all we want you to do is actually go out there, do your best, fail and know how to cope, and actually just be you and think. And that's where I know for our education system and what we're trying to facilitate with our teachers and our leaders is like, hey, just you've got to carry some sort of element that there's at some point what we believe is right today is probably wrong tomorrow. It's probably wrong down the line. Yeah. And let's just carry that element. What we think today could be proved wrong tomorrow. And that gives us a chance to then continue to not be complacent in our approach to helping build great little humans and facilitate environments that allow our teachers to be great as well.
I mean, it's crazy. Like I said, growing up in South Africa, man, I saw the worst of the worst, and seen that for 20 years. So I think this year I'll mark the 50% mark. So I've been 50% of my life in one country and 50% of my life in the other country. And I can tell you from the rest of the world looking in, and this is where it's sometimes frustrating. Like you said, 600 people in New Zealand can't handle what's going on, and because of underlying issues within there, the mental health and stuff. And I've spoken about this. I've done multiple charity events to try and bring awareness to this. But the rest of the world sees New Zealand as like this golden star. As much as we don't exist on most maps in the world, we're seen in a great fondness for education, for sport, for community, for culture, for identity. And it's like, I was like, guys, just embrace how the world loves this country. We, are seen as in the top 3 countries every time the American political system goes its way. We're on the top 3 search places for people to come move to. It's Canada and us. I don't think it'll be Canada now. There's a bit, let's not go down there. But and it's like, let's just embrace how the world loves us. And let's leave all that, all that other stuff. And I know sometimes it's maybe because we don't have enough problems. You might be having problems, but aren't you been in a third world country and you understand warfare and true utter violence? Might because that doesn't exist. We complain and moan about anything in the smallest thing, right? And it's just such a weird space. And I think if we can just embrace what we are, allow other people to embrace what they are, a lot of it will move away, right? You've said about 600 souls in New Zealand that year on year that struggle, that don't get it through it. And I'm wondering if underlying a lot of that's a part of identity. A part of it is not being able to handle where they are and feel safe with what they are and speak openly about it because this is pushed on us. You, a guy, a girl, you Pakeha, you Maori or whatever, this is the box that you got to fit in. And a lot of that will feel failure when they don't fit inside that box that we are pushing on them, and then they don't know where to go. And, they don't cope. And they don't cope. I can tell you, all of us through life have had moments where we don't cope. And I've been through depression and suicide and the darkest moments through my sort of stuff. And I got through it because I had a couple of mechanisms and areas where I could go to. But we should be allowing people to go, hey, not being able to cope is fine. Culturally, we need to stop square boxing everyone. We are a multicultural country. Let's allow ourselves to be multicultural.
And open doors.
And open doors.
Yeah.
And we are living in a time where it should be mostly accepted, but the last 12 months, it's still, and I'm going to call it out, it is still pakia to Maori to specific community to immigrants. That is still a clear hard line in the currently in the country we are in at the moment, and it's crazy that it's still there.
And that's why education is so critical for me as a gateway to support people to continue to be who they want to be.
Yeah.
Remember, I talking about those adults in my life. They didn't walk in and say to me, I did have adults that walked in and said, Raymond, you've become a statistic.
Yeah.
Raymond, you know, and it hurt me more because actually those people were people I looked up to.
Yeah.
They were teachers that I looked up to. But then I had other teachers that walked into my life and actually they didn't label me, square box me into the teenage father.
Yeah.
The Māori teenage father. They didn't label me as that because I was exhibiting signs of violence.
Yeah.
The violent teenage Māori father, you know, insert Māori something.
Yeah.
You know, they were able to step back. Even when I did have meltdowns, even when I wasn't coping, they were able to step back and actually open more doors for me to walk through and understand myself. And that's where we've made a go of actually creating environments that allow people to thrive because we step back and say, what is it you want to bring to the pot today as part of your ingredients to make this an environment that we all want to be part of? That's actually, I don't know why that seems so hard in a lot of scenarios. And being Māori in that space, there are elements to it that I add in, and there's still parts of me that I still hold back a wee bit, and whether that's tied to some of my own shame and tied to some trauma in the past as well. But ultimately, creating a system that opens doors for people to actually stand back and just take kids for who they are and what they bring to the world is absolutely, in my mind, the best way to move this country forward.
Yeah, kids are amazing, man. There's a dad I follow. I know you don't do social media, but there's a dad I follow on TikTok, and his crazy video. He's like, we should allow kids to make our decisions. We should allow kids to name things going ahead and stuff, because he goes, the creativity and the freedom and the imagination that they have hasn't been beaten down by society as yet. When kids are allowed to blossom, and that's true. We should as a community allow that to happen out there, and just bring out better humans, and the world will change. We would always get the 5% that's on the side, but you know what I'm saying? I'm never going to say we're not going to get there. There's just some people are just genetically made up the wrong way, and there's some people that just have that one screw loose that's not going to help.
But why doesn't that happen today, 2025? I often ask that. We've just got back from the US, and we lived in the Middle East, and you're traveled.
Yeah,
I think, a daily practice of mine is gratitude.
Yeah.
What am I grateful for? I'm grateful that I'm not walking around streets seeing the damage that's been caused that I saw in San Francisco. That's terrible.
Yeah.
It's what I couldn't get over, my wife and I couldn't get over, is that humans are forgetting about humans.
Yeah.
You just walk past.
Is it too much blame? I'm going to put it out there. Is it that we go to blame instead of gratefulness? Are we blaming and forgetting that we should be grateful irrespective of where we are? Irrespective if you're sitting at home, and we see it now. You're sitting at home, you're struggling to put food on the table. Should we be grateful that you still have your family, that you still have someone there, you still have love, and yes, you have your struggles. The first thing that comes out, it seems to be, is blame before gratefulness. And I think if we are grateful for what we have, irrespective if it's small or big, then the rest can move along.
Consistency of gratitude is a real key. Yeah. It's no use being grateful every fortnight. For one occasion. It's if you don't sit back and look at your children and feel tears of joy in your eyes, you're not living in the present. I truly think that. Like the practice, it is a practice. Gratitude is a practice, just like blaming. That is a practice and it is a pattern that we can fall into. And what I notice is it's not the blaming, it's the patterns that people don't know how to break. Look at your past. When I first read your LinkedIn profile and the tumor, and I think about it as a father, probably you've got a similar fear to mine. Mine is my kids going before me. That's a terrible fear of mine. Terrible. we're flying back from the States, and all I can think is like, what happens if something's in the ear? Because it's a terrible fear. But then also think about the damage we can cause when we are on Earth in that space, intended or not. And I can only imagine what your family went through when you were diagnosed with the tumor. I can only imagine what my parents were feeling when I came home and told them, hey, a girl's pregnant and we're keeping the child and we want to, I can only imagine that. In fact, I've never had the chance to stop and ask my parents, hey, how did you feel that day? I'm sorry. I've actually never said that. And I can only say that now because I live in a practice of gratitude. The lessons, even though they were harsh at the time, like you fucking ruined our lives, that's a very harsh thing to say. I don't believe that I would never have said that to Cortez if it had happened, and I don't believe I'd say that to my babies, not because of spite, because of my parents, because actually it's the wrong thing to say. But we've got levels of experiences in our life where now gratitude is the right pathway for us because we know what's worse. Think through, when we ask people to think through their toughest moments, this country is so blessed that the people's toughest moments aren't actually very tough. That's not that I want people to go out and be teenage parents, because or have brain tumor and things. We don't wish that upon people. But I think we're also a measure of our experiences. This country is very sheltered. In good and bad ways. We try to explain it, like you said, we try to explain to people about where New Zealand stands for. Oh, Lord of the Rings. We're all hobbits and things like that. But having the ability to practice gratitude means you've probably come from something where gratitude was very hard to look at the time. Compounding interest on those experiences, whether it's the tumor or being a teenage dad, or I was a victim of abuse from a family member for a long time, or things like that. Violence was a major part of my life. Those moments, their failure in business and all those sorts of experiences, I can look back on them today because I coped, survived, and now I can practice gratitude.
It's so amazing there, Ray. And there's so much that you've been through and everything else and going on. One of the big things that's everything we're speaking at the moment is talking about being a good parent and a good leader and for your organization and stuff like that. But also what people don't see is there was a lot of failures along the way. So it's not just I had a whoopsie, it was a success. Then I did this and it was a success. And you're not one of those people that just went tick box, tick box, tick box, and then you get into your 40s and you're on the top of the mountain. There was a lot of failure along the way. And there was a lot of failure that wasn't understood as failure in the beginning originally. And I want to talk about a little bit is you became a weightlifting coach for New Zealand, a top level coach, massive big tick boxes and success. You had your own gym and everything else. From the outside world, looks like major success and looks like major tick boxes. But I know personally, detrimental to not just yourself, but your wife, your marriage, and overall who you were. And again, just this whole outside thing. Oh, look, successful coach, New Zealand, kids are breaking national records or that sort of stuff. What can go wrong? Ray's unstoppable, but not known behind closed doors. There was a moment that you got to go decide and go, what the fuck am I doing? I'm destroying. You talk about a legacy. I'm actually destroying or preventing me to build a legacy for my family from that point.
That was tied to proving people wrong. It's a horrible way to live my life. When you get in, you want to prove yourself, and the coaching is a good example because I wasn't brought up a weightlifter. I stumbled on it in Doha, and I was infatuated by it. The CrossFit was just kind of breaking into the scene. I like the barbell, not so much the fit part of the experience. The running, it was terrible. But what happened was when I got back here to New Zealand, I recognised actually there's an avenue here, and this is what you do as a business or an entrepreneur. You look at it and you go, right, what's the problem here? Oh, actually, it's the access to coaches that's the issue here. And I just filled those moments, and then had to go and prove that I was on the. This is a technical, this is a business terminology. You got to prove your concept, right? So how do you prove concepts? Building athletes who succeed, who break records, who win titles, who make New Zealand teams, who win oceanic record, break oceanic records and win oceanic medals, and then go to Commonwealth Games and all that. So it was all built on that. It was all built on prove. But it's actually a very, very detrimental way in terms of everything else around you because you forgo everything.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that all coaches are like this, actually, quite frankly. When I look at people like Phil Jackson, who obviously coached some of the biggest, Jordan and the last dance, when you look at what Phil Jackson's role is in that space. He doesn't strike me as someone who's wanting to prove everyone wrong all the time. I think he was just an amazing manager that built environments for people to thrive. And there's that part in there where he talks about Dennis Rodman just saying, I'm off.
Yeah.
And he just let it happen.
Because he knew, right? He knew he had to allow that to happen, right?
Yes. If his ego was tied into that and he's proving himself, oh, hang on, we've got the Detroit Pistons and we can't lose to them. Go and get his ass back. Yeah. Would he have got the best out of Rodman? No, I don't think so. But I know back in those stages, I would have gone out and got his ass and booted him back there and probably lost him in the end. That's the beautiful lessons that have come out of the coaching space. I still recognize that there was a part of me that had to prove people wrong. Because that was my principleship. Yeah. My principleship was all built on proving people wrong. And that caught up on me. I got a year in realizing I fucking hate this job. This is a terrible job. I can't be me. I can't. And I realized that proving people wrong is just a terrible way to live life. That is not gratitude.
Because proving people wrong, put yourself first and by yourself. So you're trying to put yourself first to prove people wrong, but it's by yourself as well. There's no one with you.
No.
There's no beneficial outcome of proving everyone wrong and being the best. It is, don't get me wrong, some of the greatest people that have survived or we've seen in sport or in acting have had that mentality. And they've been the greatest, but it's been lonely for them. If you look at it realistically, it's been a solo by themselves and that sort of journey. And that's not a great way to live your life.
No.
That's not a great way to live a legacy. And I see that through, you've seen have the realization. And I think it was your dad that called you, right? And said,
Courtney's dad.
Yeah, Courtney's dad. So phoned you and said, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Do you want to be the next Les Mills?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. He said, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
And that is the kind of, again, we've talked about it through this podcast, is having these people in my life. They've always been there that have stood up when I needed someone to say, because unfortunately at that time, Courtney didn't have the courage to turn and say, Ray, what are you doing? This is ruining us.
Yeah.
It took her dad to step in and say something. And then she was like, yes, this is a very expensive hobby. You're at a net loss.
Yeah.
It taught me some amazing things as well.
Yeah.
But it also, I think the ultimate lesson is it taught me that I don't have to be the person steering the ship all the time. In fact, that's probably the major lesson I've pulled right out of that. And it reflects in the business we run today. But honestly, when I look at that situation of the coaching, and proving myself to everyone, it was a very detrimental time of my life.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things that I had learned through my journey through when I started this brand. It's a knockoff, and I've spoken about this before. It's a knockoff of Wolf of Wall Street. I wanted to be Jordan Belfort. I wanted to be that egotistic. At that time of my life, I saw Jordan Belfort as a hero, as the man on top of the mountain that had all the success. And when you look back at it, he was a man that stole billions from people, cheated on his wife, did whatever he wanted, and fundamentally a nasty human being. And I've said this before, I would never talk to him. And that sort of stuff. But I still kept it there because it showed where I started from. And then it took the humility of what I call the universe of throwing me a brain tumor to realize that I don't need to be on top. I don't need to be on top of the mountain, make myself first because it's very lonely and you're by yourself. We've got to be with someone on the journey, right? And this is the same with yourself. Being with someone on the journey is more important than being on the top and looking at them. And that's where my biggest changes has been at saying that when this started, I wanted to be the man on the top going, yeah, I am. Where now for me, I want to be the man at the bottom looking up at the people that I know and they've gotten a couple of steps ahead and the things and people find it sometimes hard. I go, everyone that I meet or anyone that I coach through my different levels of coaching that I do is I want them to be more successful than me. I've got quite a few of my own students that are in this game vastly more successful than me. And people are like, how do you handle it? Why don't you want? And it's like the old me would have hated it and would have found ways to almost be detrimental to their growth so that I was still as number one. Nah, it makes me happy. and makes me that they are doing the best versions of themselves. And I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm happy and content in my space.
It's a very, again, you don't have that opportunity to reflect on seeing that without the experience that you just shared
without
with
my
us
trauma, right?
Yes,
and
it's
that's
those elements.
And that's the hard thing. Like, we don't want the world to go through trauma to understand what is actually on the other side. Are you okay?
No.
So like I'm as much as I'm a quite a large overweight man. There's a lot of things I don't suffer from. I don't suffer from anxiety. I don't suffer fundamentally from stress as much and all the other health related issues and stuff like that. It's because I've been shown the other side.
Yes,
I've had someone question my mortality and tell me about my mortality. So all of a sudden my brain goes, okay, is this really something worth stressing about when I've seen this? It's something you wish you could like give someone the matrix and the red or blue pill, and they can experience it for 5 minutes so they can get that realization, right? But it's so hard. It's like, how do we show the world or show individuals the trauma without giving them the trauma to see the other side? And I don't know.
Brother, it's written in books. Go and read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, talks to exactly that.
Yeah.
He actually talks through a pandemic and the response that the people are jabbing people when actually the real killer, because worry actually translates into anxiety today. I have read books that were written, like James Allen's book, How As a Man Thinketh. It is all on mindset and what we think. You know, I'm like you, and I'm grateful that I don't carry a lot of stress. I don't carry a lot of anxiety today. I don't carry a lot of anger towards things. I have minimal opinions on things that don't actually concern me, and that conserves my energy so that I'm a better husband and better father and better workmate and teammate. But you know what? This is why I love reading. Well, I've got my bag over there because if I find spare moments, I pick out my book.
Yeah.
There's everything that we can go and everything that you've spoken about, we can go and find.
Yep.
And now, this is what I said to Will. This is the next version. There are your children's children are going to come back and say, actually, they were talking about that in 2025. That's what I love. People have shared these stories for a long time, and it has given me a lot of grace and opportunity to just stand back. And I'm a very big writer.
Yep.
I keep diaries all the time on every book I read. I generally diary about, and so I can go back on my notes because I'm going to pass that on to my babies.
Yep.
I want them to see my thoughts and my ruminating in that sense. I actually believe reading and now podcasts and audiobooks and now how I access YouTube and all that sort of stuff is the way forward, because we can go and YouTube the cannibals of Liberia or or what Jordan Belfort did. We can go and find that out and start to form an opinion like, actually, he's a horrible human. Yeah, cool. There was a window there where he was doing great stuff. He's a horrible human. Or in Liberia, they're eating each other. Or, there's all that stuff. And I find some of the old texts like Dale Carnegie, James Allen, Napoleon Hill, all those sorts of texts that crazily still
relevant. Napoleon Hill is still relevant to today.
Yes.
And some of the literature, outside of World War II, there's a couple of books that I've gone through, and it's still relevant because as much as we have evolved in the length of period of humans that we've evolved, it is like a second in the life of evolution. So yes, we have changed and stuff like that, but from caveman to now is like a minute, you know what I mean? So a lot of that is still relevant. Society has changed, but what we are wired and how we are wired is still so relevant. So some of that literature, even from like I said, World War II, 80 years ago, is still relevant today of how we think and how we process and stuff like that.
We're placeholders for the thoughts and feelings and beliefs. We're just placeholders. You and I are placeholders. We disappear. Someone else steps into being the placeholder of those thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And Dale Carnegie's work and Napoleon Hill, like actually, Think and Grow Rich is obviously a book, and I've read that numerous times. But actually, his real powerful book is Outwitting the Devil. That book is actually extremely relevant in confronting, because it's a man having a conversation with the devil and talking through in the 30s things that are actually relevant today. But again, without gratitude, without the ability to actually see the lessons that are in front of me, that book means nothing. I remember the first time I picked up Eckhart Tolle's books, you know, The Power of Now.
Yep.
I couldn't finish it because I was like, I'm actually living a lie. There's elements to me. I'm reading this book and it's telling me you're in charge. You get to make the choices. You get to not blame. You get to pick your attitude. I was like, hang on a minute. No, but I'm the teenage dad and people disowned me. Teachers were horrible to me. You know, Cortez's mum was horrible to me. Nah, F them, fuck that. That book confronted me and said to me, hey Ray, you probably need to go and look in the mirror a wee bit.
Yep.
And that's actually the beauty of books, and now, like I said, podcasts and all that sort of stuff. We can actually stand back and read the lessons and realize we're just placeholders for the behaviors, feelings, and attitudes that we carry today, because someone will step in to be in that place with it. Hopefully, if we've got bad attitudes and beliefs and actions, it's not our children, but someone will step into that space, whether we like it or not.
That's amazing. I love that. It's such a great explanation of placeholders. I'm totally going to steal that going forward for that, Ray. But look, as we sort of get into the end of today's show, Ray, you've got there's so much out there that you can go, and it's sort of a episode where I need to almost get you back to go on another piece. There's one more question I want to leave out. I was listening to your episode with yourself and Wolf Fleming on the 1 Minute Mentor. Wolf's obviously part of Campfire Studios and introduced us to stuff. And you spoke about something, and I was like, this is again brilliant. This is like a Ray saying, we should like Ray, whatever it is walking down an alleyway. And I know you spoke about that. If you can just end off today's show talking about this thought process of your life or your business or whatever stuff, and utilizing, as you would explain, alleyways to get to where you're going.
So alleyways growing up were the quickest routes to where you wanted to go. And as a child, you learnt those routes. If you were being chased by your brother because you're wearing his shoes, you knew which alleyway to go down. If you knew the alleyway where the fruit was, you know, Mr. Dunstall's grapes always grew over certain times of year, I could grab some of those, or some mandarins or things like that. But the alleyway, what it is that an alleyway is your path to walk day after day after day. And you become so familiar with that alleyway that you can walk it at day, at night. You know where the path is uneven, so you could possibly trip. You know there's a dog at that certain part, so you know to expect the bark. You know, those are the sorts of things. But what it's encouraging people to do is to continually walk that alleyway to get to the post that you want to get to. Learn the alleyway, know it off by heart, and just get so good at it, and then create opportunities to bring people through your alleyway, or ultimately help them find their own alleyway. I think I tried to do too much, the breadth was too great. And the alleyway analogy has allowed me to just stay focused on what it is in my alleyway. As I build great environments for people to thrive. That's my alleyway. And every day I walk that alleyway. If I'm not doing something that's not related to that, then I stay away from it. And that means staying away with opinions. It means staying away with actions that don't allow me to walk down the alleyway. And ultimately, it also means me not trying to always just drag in or jump fences and things, because it's just not a great use of your own energy, time, and skill set generally. So I'm really proud of that analogy, because it relates to me a lot as a Kiwi kid, or growing up here. But it is a good reminder for people: stick to what you know and do it really well. And I'm telling you, success will come.
That's amazing, Ray, and thanks so much. And it's a great way to end off today's show. There's so much, that we covered off today with Ray's journey, and there's so much we didn't even cover off. You can go find it out. Last question for you, Ray. I know you said you don't do social media, but where can we find you, or your history, or your legacy?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And that was, I love LinkedIn actually. It's been a cool platform to share. So LinkedIn certainly. And we have our podcast, Future Focused Podcast. But look, hey, if you get in touch with one of our Future Focused pages, you'll certainly capture me. But my LinkedIn, I really love sharing on there. It's a cool platform to meet people like yourself and celebrating your guys' success and what you're seeing. The AI guy that you had on a few weeks ago, that was awesome.
Yeah, Justin Flitter.
He was cool, man.
Yeah. There's so much knowledge there.
I've actually followed his one quite a bit. But LinkedIn is where I love reaching out and talking to people and getting some feedback.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much, that Ray. And to everyone else that's coming over to the Wolf of Queen Street, as always, massive thanks for coming over to the episode. Listen to Ray's story today. See if there's something that resonated with yourself or someone you know in the New Zealand community. We always say, like, from the episodes, you know, I don't go out and say, hey, like, share, and follow. What I say is take something that's important to you. If there's someone out there in New Zealand or a friend or anywhere in the world that you think needs to hear this to help them grow, I always say cheekily, tell them it's the best episode because it's really funny. Sucker them in to listen to it because they'll get something from it. But go out there and try fundamentally in this world and make better humans. Don't make better this or better. Better humans is what we need for the world to strive. But as always, thanks for coming over to the Wolf of Queen Street podcast and hope to see you again.